What does a bat's sonar ability, measuring ozone profiles, and X-ray devices all have in common? Well, they're all great examples of inverse problem solving. And today we're speaking with Professor Heikki Harjo from Finland about his interest in this field of study. Welcome to Dunedin, Heikki.
Thank you.
That's good. Now, just before I get into it, do bats really have good three-dimensional pictures through their sonar ability?
Yes, so that's a good example of inverse problem solving, actually.
Yeah.
It happens in the nature all the time. And also nowadays more and more examples in technology. So we typically speak about so-called forward problems and inverse problems. Forward is something when you know a model or a formula and you just compute the values.
Yes.
And inverse is something where we actually measure, or maybe the bat or ourselves measure something from the environment and then get a picture of the object around us.
So this is inverse problem solving. This is something that you're involved with as a mathematician,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And what sort of areas do you use this with? I mean, we mentioned measuring ozone profiles, which has obviously got to do with climate change.
Yeah.
Well, how does that work? How do you measure ozone profiles, for example?
It can be measured in different ways. What we have been involved, our project where actually some satellites are sent into the space and they rotate around the sphere from pole to pole and they measure the absorbed light, like you look at the sun in the evening and it's kind of red sunset. It means that the light kind of leaves its fingerprints in the spectra which goes through the atmosphere according to what gases there are actually. And this kind of information can be processed in the profiles density, so let's say ozone and other gases in the atmosphere.
Okay.
So it's a typical inverse problem. We get some measurements and then calculate the interesting values out of that using some models. We first have to have some physical or chemical model what's happening, and then we can actually calculate kind of inversely from data into the object. It's like you have a question and answer usually. But
Yes.
then you have an answer and we have to find out the question.
Okay.
That is kind of the inverse.
That's the
idea.
inverse thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
so
the origin of the name.
Yeah, I see. And so you would, with these satellites, that's how you get your answer, if you like.
Yes. Yeah.
And you get that information over a period of time.
Yes.
Well, or is it ongoing? Is it over a period of a year? Or?
It's ongoing. In this specific case, it's been going on for the last 8 years already.
Okay.
2002, a so-called Envisat satellite was launched into space, and it has several instruments, and one of the instruments is measuring especially this light spectrum, which is sensitive with respect to ozone. And of course, the background motivation has been this ozone hole stuff.
Yes, well, here in New Zealand, we're particularly concerned with the ozone holes. It seems to be right over us. So how much has that changed since the satellites have been doing their measurements?
Well, quite recently, I'm not involved in this daily operation, actually. So I'm working in the background, providing the algorithms and theory, how to actually compute them. I'm not following daily what's happening
So
there.
you don't get up to in space there with the
yes,
satellites?
but my former students have been doing their PhD studies and so on. They are now working together with those projects. And I meet them in our scientific meetings every now and then. One of them defended his thesis a couple of months ago, actually. And I asked him to provide some examples of these ozone holes and non-holes in the thesis, and he could found some case which was a couple of years ago, kind of very nice separated two holes actually, and then going together.
Oh, really?
But basically, it's not been getting worse, I would say. But again, I say I'm not on this practical level, but on the theoretical background level in this science.
Okay, so they've been measuring it for, as you say, since 2002.
Yeah.
And you get this information, then
all the time, yes.
Yeah.
It's processed and put in databases on the Earth and processed then on the continuous basis.
And do you simulate? Do you make models with this information?
Yes, so those models and simulations were done already in the earlier states.
Yes.
And now they are kind of running routinely.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
constantly.
we are not kind of everyday computing by our own hands anymore or anything. We are working on different projects actually.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of well done from our point of view.
Okay, so you work on that. Are there any other practical applications that you yourself have been involved with in terms of this inverse problem solving?
Yes, quite separate and quite a few actually. I'm working also more down-to-earth project with engineering, like chemical engineering, chemical reactors, chemical kinetics, optimal design of different parts of some industrial equipment and so on.
Oh, okay. So it's got a...
We are also, at this moment we have one project where two of my students are working in tomography, not in medicine, but log tomography. Before cutting the wood, they kind of x-ray the woods and want to see what's inside there, how to cut optimally.
It's also a way they talk about this non-invasive problem solving, isn't it? Because you don't actually have to chop things.
Non-destructive.
Non-destructive.
Yes.
Yes, always sustainable.
Yeah.
So does industry come to you, because you're based at the university in Finland, aren't you? So industry comes to you with these problems?
Yes. Of course, when we are now working at the university, we mainly work out on basis of science. But actually, I might mention that before coming back to the academia, I was 10 years working as a consultant. I had my own consulting company, and then I was working with the companies all the time. Process engineering and this kind of topics.
So you've done 10 years of that?
Yes, I was working 10 years, and then I was asked to come back to the university, and now I continue again my academic research.
And you enjoy, I guess, have you enjoyed both? I guess they're both different, aren't they?
Yes, different, but not so different. My daily work was modeling and simulation and calibration of models and optimization, also when I was working as a consultant.
I guess probably some of the biggest differences might be in the pay packet that you receive in different areas.
Yeah. I was a little bit different, but actually some of the main research topics which I'm working on now are such which I found to be very relevant when I was working with the kind of more practical industrial applications. So it might kind of give some idea what is relevant, what is not so relevant when you also face the real life problems.
Yes. So that
and I, by the way, might mention that some of our best theoretical ideas have emerged when we have been working with some real life problems, with real challenges, not just the kind of academic questions, but something which has to be solved if you want to get something done. And that kind of forces you to actually solve problems which you wouldn't do just like that out of thin air.
So that actually helps the...
It can help, yes, of course it can be also routine.
Yes.
And that was mainly the main reason why I was glad to come back to the academic world. I didn't want to continue the same kind of routine work too long.
But I guess with the sort of work you do, the inverse problem solving, it is something that you could move between the two areas. You can be academic, or you can go out and be the consulting work.
Yes. And indeed, in Finland, some of our students, we had different groups in different universities collaborating in this field. And several students actually have established spin-off companies where they actually apply the theory in practical problems and for the industry and society.
Well, that's interesting. It's the sort of thing that's being encouraged in New Zealand, that sort of thing, of getting practical applications out of university and so forth. Yeah. Particularly in science and so forth.
Yeah, it's not easy, but there are some very successful examples. One of them, by the way, is my colleague in my own university, who has a company with some 40 people, and their field is remote sensing of the forest. Primarily first, just to estimate the number of trees, the volumes and so on for the paper and pulp industries. But nowadays the emphasis is more on estimating forest as a carbon sink, as related to this discussion of climate change, where the carbon actually goes. So that can be, again, some kind of spectra is measured, in this case laser scanning of the environment, not from space but from airplanes. And that implicit information can be transformed again by some inverse algorithms into this quantities of interest like amount of carbon in the forest.
So you can tell. Can you tell which species of trees are better at?
Yes, even
absorbing?
that can be done. Yes.
So we can then say, well, these are the best sorts of trees.
Yeah. Yeah. They are doing it not just in Europe, but in US, in Brazil, some countries in Asia, and so on.
Very good. Okay, well, thank you very much for talking to us today, Heikki. We've very much enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.